And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, brighter, happier, stronger, freer, greater, and more united than ever before.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Liberty Podcast. It is the 31st day of October, 2024. Some call it Halloween. I just prefer to call it the day before November 1st. We're glad you found us here in our undisclosed location beneath the pines on this beautiful sunny day as we count down to Election Day next Tuesday, November 5. By the time you see this, there will be one full day of early voting remaining. Friday, 1 November, and that'll be until 7:30 p.m. And then comes Saturday, the last day of early voting, with truncated hours from 8 a.m. to 3, at the two locations in Moore County that we have discussed ad nauseum in Aberdeen and Carthage. And then we take a breath, we pause to worship on Sunday, we take Monday off from all the campaigning and all of the all of the verbal gymnastics, but we don't take Monday off in terms of reminding those people who have held out that they've got one more chance to get out to vote, and they've got 13 hours to do it on Tuesday, November 5. We've been talking about Tuesday, November 5 since January 1 of this calendar year, have we not? Yes, we have. So we've got Sunday to rest, and then maybe still nudge a few people to vote on Tuesday. But Monday, November 4th, is a huge day because it gives us the opportunity to line up all these voters who have been putting it off and who have been putting it off, and we say, no more excuses. Get out there on Tuesday and get it done. Now, what else can you do between now and then? You might wonder to yourself, and I'll tell you what you can do. You have an iPhone, you have a smartphone? Grab it, go to your apps, download, and search for Turning Point Action. Turning Point Action. And you will find this app popping up. This app allows you to pursue voters without leaving your home or your favorite coffee shop or the park bench or wherever you may be. With this app, you can go, Turning Point USA, and here's an option that says send texts. You push the button. Then it says, what do you want to send text to? Voters near me, the green tab. And look what you get, a list. And it even tells you the ones who have voted early so you don't have to bother them. You can go right down to the next one. Then you just press the tab accompanied next to the name, and boom, you're sending text to people. They'll even give you the content for what to send. Anybody can do this, and I recommend that you do it. And you might say, yeah, but people are getting so many texts, they're sick and tired of it. You know what? No time for sick and tired. We need people to be reminded from every direction, like incoming missile fire, until the last breath has been drawn and the last vote has been counted on November 5, ladies and gentlemen. You may say to yourself, well, I'm a Christian. I believe in the providence of Almighty God. What difference does it make who I vote for? Because God's will be done. Well, let me just point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, that while we're on this earth, serving the Lord and serving our country in that order, we do have an obligation to do more than profess our faith. We, in fact, have a biblical obligation to act out our faith, to carry out our faith, to be doers of faith. I turn to James, the book of James, chapter 2, verses 21 through 26. I won't read them all, but here are a few of the key points driven home. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? He was going to sacrifice his son on the altar to demonstrate his faith to God. Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And then it goes on. Verse 24, you see then that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. If that doesn't tell you to get out and vote, I don't know what does. Okay, because you're going to be voting for the upholding of this great nation founded under God, perhaps the only one in the world duly founded with divine providence as its guide. Now, you probably find yourself, like I do, to be perfectly honest, wondering, how can these polls be so close? And why do all these Americans want to vote for these Democrats who repeatedly express how much they really could care less about American principles and our heritage and our values? I'll tell you why. Dependency. Here's a story that just came out this week from the Epoch Times, published in the Epoch Times. Dependency on government income is highest ever. Here we go. Payments from the government have become the fastest growing source of income for Americans, according to a new study. A report by the Economic Innovation Group is titled The Great Transformation. Transfer, not transfer, transformation. The study states that Americans have become substantially more dependent on government support, with the share of national income coming from transfer payments more than doubling over the last 50 years. Get a load of this. One factor driving much of the shift from private income to government dependence is that the U.S. population is on average getting older. That's true. But here's an amazing statistic. Okay. In 1970, something like 8% of the nation was dependent on government entitlement payments. Now we see that we have this overwhelming number of people who rely on government payments. According to demographic data from USA Facts, the percentage of Americans 65 years and older increased to 17.3% in 2022 from 13% just 12 years earlier. Okay, of all government assistance payments in 2022, 56% went to the elderly, mostly from Medicare, according to the report. Healthcare costs were a major factor, both because more Americans qualified for Medicare and Medicaid, and because the cost of medical treatment rose significantly. Yes, it does, because of Medicaid and Medicare expansion in many states. In 1970, only about 1% of all U.S. counties reported that government transfers made up more than 25% of total income in their county. By 2022, more than half of U.S. counties reported dependence at that level, more than 25% of total income. So you see what's happened over time, government dependency, and that is what sustains the Democrat Party because of the promise of endless entitlements. Conversely, Republicans have done a lousy job, I have to say, of confronting our runaway spending and our massive debt bomb of $35 trillion and our unwillingness to figure out a way figure out a way to keep these vital payments going while reducing the fraud and abuse that underlies them. Massive fraud and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid and other healthcare subsidies. Unbelievable. It's staggering. Now, before we get into the meat of the action here, we've talked about the early voting, and we're going to get to some numbers in a moment. Of course, the world is up in arms, or at least our world, our political world in this election season, over the fact that the beautiful rally in MAGA Square Garden in New York, we're calling it MAGA Square Garden now, we've renamed it, that beautiful rally last week, early on, hours before the key speakers showed up, there was a comedian brought in, to tell some jokes, because Republicans have a sense of humor. Even in dark times, we figure out a way to laugh our way through. And we understand that that's a vital part of sustaining ourselves. We have to be able to keep our sense of humor, because the left is humorless. So the comedian gets up there and he makes a comment about how there's a floating trash dump out in the ocean, and it's just by the way, I think they call that Puerto Rico. And everybody shrieked and said, oh, what a terrible thing to say about Puerto Rico. And then that proceeded to spill over into criticism heaped on the Trump campaign by the salivating media, and then of course stupid Joe Biden proceeds to say no, the only garbage he's aware of is the garbage that is represented by the Trump supporters, that we are the garbage. And then that leads to Trump showing up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and hoisting himself into this beautiful garbage truck, wearing the safety vest that garbage collectors often wear. And that was one of the most brilliant reactions to an insult of the vast, 50, 60, 70, 80 million Americans. Right on a dime, the Trump campaign turned. That was brilliant. But, the one thing nobody's talked about that struck me is, why did this comedian mention that Puerto Rico is a floating pile of trash? Was it because he's racist? Turns out, no. He was really just reminding us of an actual real-time crisis in Puerto Rico. And wouldn't you know it? Just yesterday, posted to the environmentalblog.org, here are the hardcore raw facts about Puerto Rico. I'm not making this up. The Puerto Rico trash problem has been growing for decades. With a population of around 3.2 million, the island generates about 3.7 million tons of waste yearly. Despite being small, the island's landfills are full and there's no proper recycling infrastructure. This trash crisis affects everything from health to the economy, so solutions are crucial for Puerto Rico's future. Why is there so much trash in Puerto Rico, they ask? Well, limited landfill space, no recycling, high consumption. Like everywhere else, Puerto Rico has a high consumption of goods, plastic, and single-use items. And then, of course, there's tourism. Tourism brings millions of visitors to the island every year, and more trash. People love to go visit San Juan, Puerto Rico. It is a beautiful place. I was there many years ago. They also have a very weak waste management infrastructure. Hurricanes and other natural disasters have weakened the waste infrastructure, making cleanup efforts harder. So the comedian was merely referencing an actual problem that Puerto Rico has. And that's racist? I don't think so. Was it racist when we used to talk about the serious air pollution in Southern California, which, by the way, has abated, basically because in my lifetime we've had more emissions controls and cleaner burning automobiles than ever before, and our efforts have worked. And yet the environmentalists, say it's never enough. We have to impose more regulations, and we have to stop you from eating meat and having fire pits in your backyard and all this other stuff. They're nuts. They are absolutely bonko. All right, now let's get to some of the early voting data, which has been very encouraging in the battleground states where early voting among Republicans has been seen at levels never seen before in history. Another day, another 254,000 votes were banked in North Carolina on day 14 of early voting. 3.62 million votes have been cast. That includes mail-in and overseas absentee voting. Republicans so far in North Carolina have cast 1.23 million early votes. Democrats 1.18, so we continue to outpace them in early voting, and the others, the unaffiliateds, are actually outpacing the Democrats as well. On day 14, 1.208, 1,208,000 unaffiliateds and others voted early. Like Georgia, a greater share of the vote is shifting away from the white and black demographics toward the others. That's interesting. In NC, we're tracking toward a 0.1 to 0.3 R advantage, Republican advantage, compared to Democrats. And they expect others to finish in second place ahead of the Democrats. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So in terms of overall statewide voting, just in person only, we've surpassed 3.4 million, with Republicans leading the way. 34.36% of Republicans have voted early to date, or actually on day 14, compared to 33% of the unaffiliated and 32.5% of the Democrats. So on day 14, 63,000 more Republican early ballots were received than Democrat early ballots, and 20,000 more unaffiliated early ballots were received than Democrat early ballots. So again, those numbers are quite encouraging. But I'm going to get to a story in a moment which will explain to us why early voting is not the early voting data is not the ultimate way to judge what's going to go down on Election Day. But first, let's talk about two key races in North Carolina and where they stand. One is for Attorney General. That's Congressman Dan Bishop, the stalwart conservative in Washington, now running for Attorney General back in his home state, against this lightweight Democrat named Jeff Jackson. According to a WRAL poll, the race to be North Carolina's next AG likely will be decided by voters who are still making up their minds. They find that Jackson leads Republican Dan Bishop 44-42 in a poll conducted October 23 through 26, very recently. Then that narrow margin is within the survey's credibility interval, that's margin of error, of 4.1 percentage points. So 44-42 is really a dead heat. Okay, but the poll found that 14% of voters have yet to decide who they will vote for in the race to be the state's top law enforcement officer. I almost said orificer, like Rush Limbaugh used to say, orifice instead of office. The poll found that nearly 1 in 4 registered unaffiliated voters were still undecided. So that's really big, and that's another reason that you must be motivated to get people in your sphere of influence out to vote. Let's say they say, I can't vote for Trump and I can't vote for Harris. Fine. I can't vote for Mark Robinson because I believe CNN's bogus reporting, and I really can't vote for Josh Stein because I know he's been a lousy attorney general. Fine. Vote for attorney general. Vote for races in the NC House and Senate. Vote for Hal Weatherman for lieutenant governor. There are many other races you can vote in that matter every day of your life when these people are in office. Now let's go to the race for superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction, which of course deeply and directly affects the trend and the direction of public education in our state. The race to oversee North Carolina's public schools remains tight with just a week to go before Election Day. A new poll finds that 42% of likely voters say they are supporting Republican Michele Morrow, a first-time candidate, while 41% they plan to vote for Democrat Mo Green. But again, 17% of likely voters are undecided in this race, even more so than in the AG race. That's pretty incredible. The candidates have traded places over the past 7 months in this back and forth race. Green at one point led Morrow 40-38 in September, and Morrow led Green 41-40 back in a March poll right after the primaries. So this has been going back and forth. It's going to be very tight. But the fact that Morrow, who has been tarred and feathered by national media because she went to Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 with like a million other people, that they say that disqualifies her to be elected to oversee the direction of public education. I say no. This is a conservative. This is a woman who believes that public schools are broken. Thus, she homeschooled her own children, which is not disqualifying, but actually makes her a much better person to have in that role as superintendent of public instruction. Mo Green was a superintendent of schools in some lefty county in North Carolina, and has direct ties to a George Soros-backed organization based in North Carolina. So please, those 17% who are undecided need to hear from you about why they should vote for Michele Morrow tomorrow and on Saturday and next Tuesday. Okay? Got it? Get it? Live it? Dream it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I told you about what we should be leery of with regard to the overwhelming performance by Republicans in early voting. This from Nate Silver, the well-established pollster and political analyst. More than 57 million people have already voted. Orders of magnitude more people than in a typical poll, of course. So how can it not be more informative than polls? This early voting outcome, he asks. Well, the answer is that early voters, even if we know how they voted, and we don't, that's true, they are not a representative sample of the electorate, while a poll is at least theoretically supposed to be a representative sample. He turns our attention to 2016, the last non-Wuhan virus election. Democrats, you may recall, but you've probably forgotten, but in 2016, Democrats led the early vote in West Virginia by 12 points, but Donald Trump eventually won the state by more than 40 points. So the early voting told us nothing there. It made Democrats think they were going to win easily, and that didn't happen. Also, more Republicans than Democrats voted early in Colorado in 2016, but Hillary won there. The bottom line, says Nate Silver, is that early vote returns are highly non-predictive of election outcomes. Okay? Nonetheless, he does concede that early voting is what you would call hard data. It is not totally to be ignored. He points to Nevada. Democrats now only have about a 20,000 voter advantage among active registered voters, as compared with 87,000 voter advantage for Democrats in November of 2020. So, boy, they've really tightened up that gap in terms of party registration in Nevada. Could this be a bad sign for Democrats? Absolutely. It's one of the things that would keep me up at night if I were the Harris campaign or a pollster that showed a Harris lead in the states where registration numbers have shifted. So a Harris lead may not hold up through Election Day. The bottom line, he writes, is that predictions based on the early vote have a really bad track record. In 2016, it was one of those things that convinced the media and Democrats that Clinton was absolutely certain to win. And she absolutely certainly, thank God, did not win. Oh boy, did she not ever win. And she's still never gotten over that to this day, has she? It's glorious to think about, really, that no matter what else happens in our lifetime, we can say that Hillary Clinton will never, ever, ever be president. Now, so Nate Silver is telling us don't ignore the polls. So let's see what the polls are saying in the early voting for the battleground states, okay, in the early voting season. This is fresh off the presses from my subscription-only access to the Rasmussen reports. So I pony up the cash for this subscription for you, okay? I do it for you. With Election Day looming, former President Donald Trump leads in the battleground states of Georgia and Arizona, while Vice President Kamala Harris remains ahead in New Mexico. A new telephone and online survey by Rasmussen reports an American thinker finds that if the election were held today, 51% of likely Georgia voters would vote for Trump, while 46% would vote for Harris. 2% said they would vote for some other candidate. Okay. Trump has a 2-point lead in Arizona, where he gets 48% to Harris's 46%, with 3% preferring some other candidate and 5% still undecided. Again, we see this undecided number popping up again and again. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, which Biden won by a double-digit margin in 2020, Harris now leads by 5, 49 to 44, 4% saying they would vote for some other candidate. All right. That's interesting. So that covers some of the key battleground states there. The numbers that we're seeing in North Carolina are showing still with Trump holding a narrow advantage as well in early during the early voting season. Again, the aggregate polls I think show Harris with something like a 0.9% lead in the aggregate polling in North Carolina. I'm not buying that because, again, Election Day is 13 hours of opportunity for the undecideds to get off the darn fence and come on down and put their feet on the ground and vote with those feet when it counts most for the first time ever. By the way, living in a battleground state like North Carolina, we've been fortunate to be welcoming President Trump and J.D. Vance repeatedly over the past several weeks. It's been great having him here. President Trump earlier this week was in Rocky Mount, and that was a heck of a well-attended rally. And then just on the morning of October 31st, as I'm speaking to you, J.D. Vance did an early morning town hall at High Point University with none other than Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, which is the campus outreach organization, which has converted untold tens of thousands of university students toward conservatism. And his rallies now are overwhelmingly seeing students lined up en masse to hear from Charlie and to receive their free MAGA hats and T-shirts and the like. 5 years ago, most of the people he attracted on a campus were protesters throwing paint at him and hurling insults at him. That has totally reversed. So on October 31st in the morning, he sits down with J.D. Vance in front of an audience of High Point University students. And let's dip into a moment or two of what they had to say.
Less and less young people believe it's even possible to restore the American dream. And it needs to be a rebirth of optimism that our best days can be ahead. President Donald Trump has laid out an amazing agenda, starting with, of course, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, drill baby drill, no tax on Social Security, largest middle-class tax cut, and increasing the pool of homes. Talk more about how we just need to reinvigorate the psyche of a younger generation that has just sometimes checked out, has become largely cynical about their future.
Yeah. Well, I think the way to reinvigorate America is to do it substantively and to do it with real ideas that are going to improve the lives of our citizens, not with these ridiculous slogans. I mean, you ask Kamala Harris a question, even in a softball interview, and I'll say this for Kamala Harris, I think that every time she answers one of these questions, we pick up about 50,000 or 100,000 votes because, they'll say, what is your specific plan to lower the price of groceries? What's your specific plan to make the American dream of homeownership more affordable? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. It's like, okay, I grew up in a working-class family, and that's not a solution to the problems that the country is facing. It's important to talk about your background so people know who you are, but it's also important to talk about the details. And what I think that President Trump is fundamentally proposing is he's trying to make it easier to invest and build things in the United States of America, whether that's a home, a family, a business. He's trying to make it harder to offshore and ship the American dream to other countries.
Now, one thing I will say about the Wall Street Journal as we've moved through this election season is this, that their op-ed page continues to be quite, shall we say, well aware of the nonsense that is spewing forth from the Harris campaign, both from Harris herself and her extremely arrogant and sort of angry delivery of her campaign messages, and then of course the dopey Tim Walz, who just runs around saying that Trump is Hitler and he's a hunter and J.D. Vance is just another Yale lawyer. Never mind what a great American story J.D. is, as we've all come to know in recent weeks since Trump selected him. But I will say this about the Wall Street Journal. Their news section, their front page, seems to be very hell-bent in similar like they're trying to keep up with the New York Times and the Washington Post in publishing stories clearly intended to cause voters to question Donald Trump's campaign. Last week, it was a story that no one else has substantiated or picked up on, that Elon Musk has this running dialogue and conversation with Vladimir Putin in Russia, and that he's influencing Vladimir Putin in terms of their military activity in Ukraine. And that clearly was a piece designed to call into question the Trump campaign's relationship with Elon Musk. Today, in the Wall Street Journal, the headline on the front page provides this warning: Trump allies draw up plans targeting legal immigration. Legal immigration. They're coming for the legal immigrants, according to the Wall Street Journal. Donald Trump routinely promises he will end illegal immigration. Behind the scenes, his closest advisors and allies are also drawing up plans that would restrict many forms of legal immigration, some of which could affect the ability of businesses to hire foreign workers. Now, this is not something that Donald Trump talks about, and his administration between 17 and 20, the only restrictions that they applied to legal immigrants and visitors occurred in as the virus was starting to spread, and they reference this. The plans feature a return of some controversial policies from his first term. Included are a ban on travel to the U.S. from several Muslim-majority countries, a halt on refugee resettlement from overseas, and the public charge rule, a policy seeking to block immigrants who are low income, disabled, or speak limited English, so those people wouldn't eventually use public benefits. Well, it seems to me that if legal immigrants are as much of a burden as illegal immigrants, we should, as a country, be able to decide who comes in and who stays out. I don't see a problem with that. And the ban on travel from Muslim countries, well, that was designed simply to keep potential terrorists out. Now, in the meantime, the Biden regime has allowed so many potential terrorists to walk right across our border that the idea that banning them from flying in on airplanes is somehow evil sounds really stupid now, doesn't it? I'll say it does. Last time around, Trump's team struggled to fully implement most of its immigration policies because they weren't issued properly, allowing them to be toppled by lawsuits. Anyway, the point is that Donald Trump certainly, and Republicans certainly understand that a legal immigration process continues to be a part of the fabric of this country. It always has been. No one questions that. No one questions that. But to drum up this story that, the Trump campaign and his advisors are scheming and plotting to keep people from legally entering this country as migrants just seems to me like an 11th hour attempt to possibly influence undecided voters. So read even the Wall Street Journal with great discernment, I beg you. Now, before we go, you may be familiar with an excellent digital news website called revolver.news. Revolver. It is captained by Daryl Beatty. It is one of the more aggressive investigative reporting news sites. So I'm sorry, did I call him Daryl? I think it's Darren Beatty. It's actually Darren Beatty. Yes, he'll forgive me, I'm sure. But here's what he has to say. So let's say we get through the election. Let's say somehow we avert all of these efforts by the left to cheat and compromise the outcome. And let's say that as many of us are praying and hoping that Donald Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States with J.D. Vance as his vice president, and that we retain majorities in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, and that we can go about doing the work of restoring our nation's economic health and our nation's freedoms as the founders intended them. Here's what Revolver warns us against. They're talking about Representative Jamie Raskin, a virulent Democrat, really a bitter man. He is furious at the Supreme Court for not going along with the ridiculous theory of his that Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president on the basis of inciting the January 6th insurrection, which Revolver properly refers to as the Fedsurrection. To contextualize his grievance, Raskin undertakes a mini lecture in pseudo-constitutional law history, whining about the Supreme Court not being an agent of positive social change. Here's what it does. Here's where it does get actually wild, and we're going to share with you the video clip of this. Raskin says the job is now up to Congress to uphold Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, by which he means uphold his theory that Trump is not qualified for office. And upholding in this context seems to mean not certifying the election even if Trump is the clear winner. And then Raskin says, we all have bodyguards and we prepare for Civil War conditions. Obviously, Raskin is a nut job, but it is still concerning for a member of Congress to have this position. Let's take a look at what Raskin said during an interview a couple of months ago about his position that Congress must, even if Trump wins decisively next week, must fail to certify the outcome. Watch this.
That means the only thing that really works is people in motion amending the Constitution. But again, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient, because what can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress, so it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody and Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have Not many cases to look at every year. Not that much work to do. A huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And
Well, we thank you again for joining us on this Liberty podcast. It's hard to believe it, but the next time we get together, Election Day will be in the rearview mirror. The 2024 election should be over. Let's hope it is in 1 week's time from now. But we could also be talking about more vote counting in certain states where they didn't get their act together, or whereby some of these machines were faulty and have caused delays in tabulation. We could be talking about all of that all over again. I hope and pray that we're not. But no matter what, we're going to be back here. And between now and then, we're going to be remaining vigilant right here in the Liberty Podcast Nerve Center. And we do it for you. And we're going to do it again next time. Thanks for joining us.